Storvim Gyros barely returned to consciousness. His head rang and felt like it would pull apart, so heavy was the concussion he was presently enduring. His eyes were mostly closed, swollen and discolored, he would wager. But he did not open them yet. Not fully. Well, as fully as he could under the circumstances. Not yet. As the sounds of the sprawling camp assailed his senses and cut through the tinnitus echoing around his skull, yet there were no smells. Despite his blood congealing in seconds, as did all Astartes, due to their enhanced physiology, he could not smell. His nose was broken in so many places, it must have looked like a miniature flesh accordion stapled to the plane of his face. He took stock. His arms were tied firmly behind his back, his legs tethered to the ground by a more ingenuitive method. From the pain, it would seem that they had driven meter-long spikes through his armor, through his feet, and into the ground itself. The Marine shifted a millimeter to check the situation. He could feel the hot metal through his entire foot. It was confirmed. He was going nowhere. Good. They had him exactly where he wanted them to. Storvim Gyros ran his swollen tongue around the cavity of his mouth, firstly checking he still had a tongue, but also to see if he would be able to speak at all. Calmly, he found the missing teeth, but also the burn marks on the inside of his mouth, as they had cauterized his glands there. No acid spit today. They knew their business, is what they must have thought. The Marine would have chortled, even through the pain, had his mask not been so very important. His jaw was still intact and his vocal cords still present. He could make noise if he so chose. His power armor was still mostly on him. They had not the wit or skill to be able to unlatch it and remove it. Good. Storvim sat there in silence, eyes still open only a tiny slit as he took stock. He mainly saw light and shadow. A tent. From the glares as the wind swept open the portal every now and again, and light cascaded into the tent from time to time. Within the shadows, he could make out two figures only. Perhaps there were more behind him, to his side, but he could only make out the two to his fore. They sat in silence, but he could not make out if they were resting, sleeping, or watching. He lurched his head in what would appear to be an unconscious, natural way. Alert your fit between terrifying dreams, so that he could take in more angles. None moved. None reacted. It seemed his napping period had contained these movements already. And there they were, as he scanned around surreptitiously. His bolter, his pistol, combat knife, and his helmet. Good. But the Marine could not make out much more of his surroundings due to the lack of light. So he waited, patiently, through the pain, through the boredom, through the inactivity. Many think that waiting is doing nothing. Storvim knew that this was not the case. Sometimes the most important part of any operation, any strike, was the waiting. And it was not a passive thing. He was preparing. The flesh was weak, but Storvim Gyros was not. He would be ready. Eventually, the tent flap was hauled fully back, and in processed a new player in this, his final drama. A few large and ugly brutish men appeared and seemed to be flanking a tall and willowy being. Being was the only word that Storvim could use to describe him. He was not human, not really, and certainly no more so than the Marine who sat in restraints. It seemed to glide more than walk. Its long robes trailing the ground made a soft brushing noise as it moved forward. No footsteps. The being floated around him, languidly taking in the marine. And so the gloating began. "So, I see that you are desperate. Desperate to find me. To kill me. You are a marine. Yet you are nothing more than a base assassin. And a poor one at that. Oh, how are the mighty fallen in battle?" It leered as it came in closer, moving its face almost to within spitting distance of Storvim. He resisted the urge to hawk and launch his phlegm, but it took effort. "I know you are awake, little sycophant of the corpse god. End the pretense." With that, Storvim permitted himself a flutter of a wry smile as he then opened his eyes, straightened in his chair, and glared at the being. His eyes were indeed bruised to the level where only one opened sufficiently for him to see properly, to hold its glare. The windows of the soul, some called them, and in the eyes of his enemy, this patriarch of the Chaos Lords, he could see nothing but swirling fires and hate and pain. So much for the vaunted prowess of the Adeptus Astartes, the corpse god's own angels of death. How easily you were found. How easily you were subdued by my adherents. Pathetic. Storvim Gardos now opened his mouth for the first time. "You made it impossible to find you in the midst of all these millions of huddled scum." "Indeed. Your forays into the camp have proven weak. I always just slip away while my followers cover my exit. Do you think that there is even one person in this great congregation that will turn me over to you?" "No. We gave up on that idea a long time ago." "Yes, we see that. And you cannot kill us all. Not nearly enough of you for that, is there? Not nearly enough. And I now fear that perhaps our mighty throng should rise up, should take the fight to your kind, skulking on the periphery of our movement, our camp. Like a hungry dog waiting for scraps, you are beaten. Before we even rise up, you, the legendary Space Marines, are as nothing compared to our host. You are already beaten." Storvim took in his opponent, the lord at the center of this ocean of heretics and scum, and a glint appeared in his eye as he responded. "Not quite. You see, we can crush you at any time we like, but we wanted to make sure that you were dead. The rest we can get to in our own time, even utilize the PDF and the guard. For we, Iron Hands, are here merely to kill you. A quest you have singularly failed in. So, Marine, what is the next move? What have your masters planned if you fail? You will tell me. Oh, you will tell me." At this, coronas of nauseatingly clashing colours and hues erupted from the being's eyes and hands as he now stalked towards the seemingly helpless Marine. "In fact, by the time I am finished, you will beg to tell me." "No need. I will tell you right now." "Command! The flesh is weak." "What?" At this, the helm in the corner crackled and a response came through its vox.
"Affirmative. Firing on your location. Your name will be added to the annals, the rolls of honor. Go to the Emperor's side, brother."
The being stepped back in shock and confusion as the distant sounds of missiles sped closer. "Goodbye, heretic." And at this, the missiles struck the area. Huge explosions bloomed around the tent in a perfect circular pattern that worked its way into the center. Within a minute, the entire segment of the camp was flattened and burning. The Lord dead, the snake headless, The Iron Hands then assembled before the camp and slowly marched into their ranks, chainswords roaring and bolters blazing. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the important factions, forces, and war gear of the Warhammer 40k universe, the grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we are to discuss one of my favorite vehicles in the entire setting. I realize I say that a lot, but each time I concentrate on doing an entry, I rekindle my adoration of the things I am to describe. So do forgive me for being effusive. So, let us discuss a tank that has been in the game from the very first edition, Rogue Trader days. The very underrated, yet always fun, Whirlwind. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote, the Whirlwind. The Whirlwind is an Imperial artillery support vehicle based on the standard template construct Rhino armoured personnel carrier chassis that is now primarily used by the Space Marines of the Adeptus Astartes. The Whirlwind, whose standard pattern is known as the Whirlwind Helios, plays the role of artillery, providing supporting fire on enemy formations from the relative safety of geographical cover, such as behind hills, forests, or other line-of-sight obstructions. It is intended to be used primarily for softening up a heavily fortified static position or other well-defended targets prior to the start of a major Space Marine assault. The launcher's normal payload consists of solid fuel, high-explosive missiles, but it is also capable of firing incendiary warheads to burn the enemy out of entrenched positions. The Whirlwind is available exclusively to Space Marine forces and is typically deployed in squadrons of 3 units, though in smaller actions individual vehicles may be observed operating just as effectively. Unlike the Astra Militarum, Space Marine chapters do not rely on heavy artillery bombardments and rarely deploy artillery unless it is truly needed. Many times when Whirlwinds are deployed to the battlefield, they will only ever deliver a brief yet highly effective barrage against enemy targets, after which the Space Marines will engage any enemy forces that remain. When compared to the artillery tanks of the Imperial Guard, such as the Basilisk and the Medusa, the Whirlwind's range is much shorter, but it can unleash its weapons payload with a much faster reaction time. The Whirlwind is one of only a handful of Space Marine vehicles that are capable of firing at their targets indirectly. This capability, combined with the vehicle's great mobility, allow it to fire upon an enemy and then quickly relocate to avoid enemy return fire. The Whirlwind is equipped with a dorsal-mounted Whirlwind multiple missile launcher that is placed on the rotating turret on the vehicle's top that is capable of firing a number of different types of missile ordnance. The Whirlwind Helios originated on the Forge world of Helios, and the Whirlwind multiple missile launcher on this pattern is capable of carrying 60 missiles. The Whirlwind, like all other Rhino variants, can also be outfitted with dozer blades, extra armor plating, a hunter-killer missile launcher, improved communications equipment, a pintle-mounted storm bolter, a searchlight, and smoke launchers. Ammunition. The Whirlwind missile launcher is capable of firing multiple types of missiles, many of which are arcane and can only be found within the quantum-sealed stasis chambers of the Death Watch and other secretive bodies within the upper echelons of the Imperial war machine. The following is a list of known types, including Vengeance missiles. Vengeance missiles represent the standard high-explosive warhead used by the Astartes. Castellan missiles. Castellan missiles are tipped with a special warhead that can be set to explode at specific times and altitudes to scatter small mine-like bomblets across a designated target area. Castellan missiles can establish makeshift minefields quickly and without exposing Imperial forces to unnecessary dangers by laying mines. Incendiary Castellan missiles. An incendiary Castellan missile's warhead had been further modified to scatter burning promethium over a designated target area rather than bomblets. These horrific weapons are used to literally burn to death lightly armored enemy infantry and light vehicle formations. There are a myriad of different forms of missile that have been previously used, but unfortunately, the Imperium no longer has the technical skill to generate these missiles and make them available. These include plasma missiles, supercrack missiles, vortex missiles, gas missiles, anti-plant missiles, haywire missiles, and tanglefoot warheads. Please note that the only missiles presently available to use in standard games are the Castellan and Vengeance. End quote. Now the Whirlwind will always have a nostalgic feel to me because of its pedigree, and embarrassingly enough, I do not even own one at present. Hopefully something I can rectify soon. But the Whirlwind has always been a thing of joy to me as well, because it robs the enemy of their ability to hide and skulk around on the edges or back ranks of the board. The Whirlwind does not need to have line of sight, so it can hit anyone at any time, no matter how they may bunker. And that can be a thing of true joy. It's not a gotcha moment, or an unbalanced unit that draws moaning and requests for a nerfing. Oh no, many feel it is awful. Cost, points, punching power, etc., and they are all most likely right. But when you have a weapon like this, that are carried by other races like the Tyranids and their Hive Guard, the Eldar and their Night Spinners or Tempest Launchers, then you are flushing out the enemy leadership or highly important targets before you even roll a die. As soon as you have deployed, the enemy know that they cannot hide, cannot skulk, cannot avoid your attention, no matter where they are deployed or moved on the board. So they are forced to come out into the open and make it a stand-up fight, instead of a bug hunt, a decent scrap. And that can be an awful lot of fun, because it can bring out the genius of another player as well. For some like to read ideas or lists on the internet, and then see how they work out. Net listing, as they call it. Even I've done it. Just to have a look. Some out of curiosity, some out of a sheer wish to find a win button, as they call it. The Holy Grail, the list that will always win. But of course, this does not exist. For no matter how powerful your force, dice are involved, and the skill levels of the other player in positioning, target priority, etc. But when you bring out a less frequently used unit, you can often rock the boat, throw over the apple cart of their well-laid plan for the battle. And in that instant, in that very moment, your friend will either fold and his shoulders will slacken, or, and this is a wonder to see in action, their brow furrows for a moment, and then, if you are lucky, if they are expressive, you will literally be able to see the moment that they make the decision to throw away the crutches, the net-prescribed method of operating their army, and they will adapt. And when they do that, when they give up on the ideas of others and start to form their own plans, their own reactions, then their inner tactician is allowed to shine. And trust me, gentle listener, it is then that the light of their genius begins to show, and they take their first steps from the path of the follower onto the pathway of the true general, to do it their way. And often, win, lose, or draw, you will find these are indeed the most exhilarating and memorable of all of the battles you will play. Because it is actually playing with your friend, not the avalanche of YouTube and forum tactical advance he has consumed. You play with your friend, and that, gentle listener, is what it is truly all about. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you've enjoyed this brief introduction to Whirlwind tanks. If so, then please consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also consider joining our Patreon, or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It would be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.